Welcome to another session of Gamma. Today we're going to be dealing with the topic of integrity, which is a very important topic because it lies at the center of how we interact with each other. Matthew chapter 5 verses 33 to 37. Let's read. Again, you've heard that it was said of those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes for evil." So today's topic is about integrity, truth, and honesty. The trouble is, it is a default mode of us as sinners as we lie because we try to use the lies to get ourselves out of trouble, bolster our reputations, which might be bad to start off with. And here you have a situation where the people whom Jesus is talking to have a problem with a lack of credibility. And so therefore, they resort to swearing. Now let's look at this picture. Here you actually have the seriousness of the lie against what you swore by. If you swear by your life, and if it was a lie, then you basically owe your life. You could, if your life isn't as valuable, you'll swear by all other things. For example, you could swear by your own life, or your family's life, or God's temple, or God's name. So whatever you use to swear, the more valuable it is, the more serious the lie if you are actually lying, because you're using this to basically bolster your own credibility. Matthew 23 also talks about this. Let me read to you Matthew 23. "Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? If you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that's on the altar, he's bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that made the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. Whoever swears by the temple swears by it and him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it." So, what this other passage in Matthew is saying, that the seriousness of the lie depends on what you swear by. And according to the Jews, if you swore by the temple, it's not as bad if you actually lied compared to if you swore by the gold of the temple, or if you swore by the altar, it's not as bad if you lied compared to if you swore by the sacrifice on the altar. If you swore by the temple of God, it's not as bad as swearing by God's name itself. So basically, they had an artificial system by which you could distinguish the seriousness of lies by what you actually swore by. But the problem is that Jesus looks at this whole thing and saying it's a stupid argument because God is everywhere. Whether you swear by the altar, swear by the temple, whatever it is, it's related to God. God sees you when you're actually lying. Remember, the story was told by Tim Keller of a gentleman whom we were counseling, whose life had fallen apart because of adultery. And whenever his wife was traveling to a foreign place for business, he would bring his mistress and they would have sex in the middle of the day in his own apartment. The trouble is, there's so many wedding photos there. And every time he would have bring his girlfriend there, he would actually turn the wedding photos to face the other way. And there's so many of them, he had to go around the whole house, turning them everywhere so that he would not see his wife, or as it were, his wife would not see him when he was having an affair with this girlfriend of his. He was breaking his vow. There was lack of integrity. He would not have done it if his wife was in the house, but because the wedding photos reminded him of her presence, he had to turn it away. Now Jesus is saying, you can't turn the photo of God away. Everywhere you are, whatever you swear by, God is there. God knows whether you're telling the truth or not. We do that too, don't we? When we have lied or sinned or gone to some dodgy business transaction, we refuse to pray or join a prayer meeting or read the Bible because it's like your wife's photo. It looks at you and it condemns you. After a while, you don't read the Bible anymore. I had someone I knew who was a financial investor who refused to go to church, but he would ask me to take his tithing to the church. He'd always remember his tithing, but he would not come to church. Why do you think he did that? He probably did that because he must have had some dodgy business deals with which he had gained his money. He was not proud of it, but he continued to pay his tithing because of the fear that God would punish him and the stocks would go down. We actually have, in this situation, like a love-hate relationship with God. You are unfaithful, but you are fearful. You don't really believe the Bible or follow it or buy into what the church teaches you. Maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't, but you better cover your bets and bribe God. You reconstruct a concept of God who cannot see your heart, but was dumb enough to accept your bribes. And this is a caricature of what God actually is. He tells them that the righteousness must surpass that of the Pharisees, the people with the strictest code of the law. See, they believe that they lived a good life, God will owe them, He had to bless them, will bring them to heaven. You'll be a person of integrity if you understand that God is everywhere. But if you're a Pharisee, the fact that God is everywhere is absolutely crushing because they operate out of fear and are afraid of being condemned. So anything that reminds them that God is looking at them is actually terrifying to them. So they construct all these weird ideas about sharing, about swearing. That if you are saved by grace, you're no longer operating out of the fear of condemnation, but a fear of grieving God. And you want to delight in God's law because God's law is a way of avoiding you grieving Him. This verse is key to keeping our integrity. It's by David, Psalm 16:18. I have set the Lord always before me. Because He is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Now, David recognizes the presence of God. It doesn't mean when he sets God before him, it doesn't mean he creates it. All right, but he recognizes it. So therefore, David does not do anything that he will be ashamed of. At the same time, the one who loves him is at his side. That is a secret of integrity. The secret of integrity is that you will be the same person everywhere you go. The same person in public as the same person in private because you're always before God. Matthew 5:37. This describes integrity. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes out as evil. You see, the word integrity actually comes from a mathematical concept of integer. All right? -3, -2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. They're all whole numbers. A person without integrity is fractured. A person with integrity is whole. Whole numbers have no fraction. So here is a definition of integrity. Integrity means wholeness or oneness. Someone with integrity has perfect alignment between their words, their action, and their beliefs. A person of integrity is not divided. They do not say one thing and do another. They're consistent to the core. They don't say one thing and behind your back say another thing, as one in gossiping. Years ago in a Baptist church, one of the biggest problems was that pastors had to be voted in by the majority vote. And this had a lot of difficulties because you got so many different groups within the church, all of different opinions. And if you said yes to every single group, you'll wind up being inconsistent because your yes to one group will mean a no to another group. Politicians have the same problem. They have to please everyone. Cut. C.S. Lewis has a great quote on this, and it describes the struggle that we actually have in society. On one hand, we admire, we want to have integrity. On the other hand, we actually make it impossible. He writes, we clamor for the very qualities that we are rendering impossible. We laugh at honor, but we are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful. There are a whole bunch of problems that we actually have with a lack of integrity in our society today. There are 4 problems. 1, it destroys human community. 2, it destroys human identity. 3, it destroys human dignity. And the 4th thing is that it puts you in a collision course with reality. Firstly, the lack of integrity destroys community. How does it do it? Well, somewhere along the line, someone from one side or the other, one race or the other, has told his side that the other side or the other race is bad. They're taking advantage of you, they're bullying you, they're threatening your position, they're bad, they're evil. And this, when these things are believed, barriers, disunity, hatred builds up along racial lines, along party lines, along ideological lines. This is common. It destroys community. What about partnerships? Why is it so often that many partnerships invariably break up? Why? Because one partner or the other seeks advantage over the other partner. He either breaks the contract or slips in a clause that severely disadvantages the other partner, who doesn't find out until later on and feels this is unfair, and this lack of integrity breaks them up. It breaks up community. What about the church? The most common thing that happens in the church or in a church breakup is when one person feeds an unsubstantiated rumor about a pastor or elder or leader, and half the congregation believe in it, and the other half, who have been personally ministered to by the pastor, will not believe it, and then they become polarized along personal allegiances. And that's why so many splits have occurred, simply because of the lack of integrity. The next problem that the lack of integrity does is that it destroys human identity. It's the idea of who we are. We are something that we do or believe, or something that we are that always stays the same. And if we have lack of integrity, this is inevitably destroyed. Edith Stein was a German Jewish philosopher who actually converted to Catholicism and became a Carmelite nun. She was canonized as a martyr because she was actually killed for her beliefs by the Nazi Party during World War II, and she was actually canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. And she writes some really important words about self-identity. She writes, "The human soul must have self-knowledge and be capable of taking a stand with respect to its own self. It must find itself in a dual sense. It must learn to know itself, and it must come to be what it was destined to be." So therefore, there is a true self and identity. You must actually understand who you are and what we are actually destined to be. And that's the basis of our identity stability. Here's a picture of Sir Thomas More, very famous English lawyer, diplomat, statesman, and internationally renowned humanist scholar. He entered royal service in 1517 and was appointed Lord Chancellor of the realm in 1529. He served under the famous Henry VIII, who wanted to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry Anne Boleyn. Thomas More opposed this, and he actually resigned, tried to get away. But then Henry took the Church of England out of Roman Catholic influence, and Thomas More was imprisoned because he didn't want to recognize what Henry had done. He was under the threat of death and execution, and all he had to do was to endorse what Henry had done, abandon his beliefs in his Catholic Church. But he refused. He held on to the integrity of his beliefs. Here is a beautiful quotation from a play by Robert Bolt, looking at the last words of Sir Thomas More when he was speaking to his daughter, explaining to his daughter why he was willing to face death rather than just to deny his own beliefs. It would be so simple. All you have to do is just follow to Henry VIII, buy into all this, and then he would be freed. Very simple. But this is what he says. When a man takes an oath, Meg, he's holding his own self in his own hands. Like water, he cups his hands. And if he opens his fingers, then he didn't hope to find himself again. Some men aren't capable of this, but I'd loathe to think that your father is one of them. So therefore, Sir Thomas More is saying that his beliefs form his identity, and if he were to give up his beliefs in the loss of integrity, he would actually lose himself. He will never find himself and all he has done in his entire life. So the lack of integrity destroys identity. Sadly, there are very few people like Sir Thomas More who would be standing for his belief in integrity. In fact, the world is filled today with many more people like George Bernard Shaw, Irish playwright, famous writer, and Nobel Prize winner in literature who actually writes, life isn't about finding yourself, but recreating yourself. So therefore, in a series of whether truths or untruths, life is about spinning and creating a narrative of what you are and you present to the world, not being authentic. Is that what life is about? Well, let's look at what psychologists have to say about that. Let me illustrate this with some ideas from Erik Erikson, who was an ego psychologist who developed one of the most popular and influential theories of development. Erikson just suggested there were 8 very important stages of psychological development in which people deal with conflict and emerge with the psychological strengths that will serve them well for the rest of their lives. If they fail to deal effectively with each of these conflicts, they may not develop the essential skills needed for strong identity. When people talk about identity, they're referring to all the beliefs, ideals, and values that will help shape and guide a person's behavior. So the first crucial stage is in adolescence, when one develops ideals and beliefs that will form the basis of their personality and identity. For example, a teenager might think based on what his peers think and himself and his achievements and his own ideals and experiences that he's a very kind and generous guy. He develops this image and his behavior is molded by this, and the rest of his life he acts in a way that's consistent with his identity. Then, towards the end of life, there's the final stage of life called the integrity versus despair stage. Those who feel proud of their accomplishments will feel a sense of integrity. This is based on the extent of which the behavior is consistent and in line with their perceived identity. Successfully completing this phase means looking back with few regrets and a general feeling of satisfaction. If one were to live a life without integrity, there would be a destruction of one's identity because your behavior is at odds with your identity. You could say you're one thing, but you act in another way. For example, if a doctor believes in the sanctity of all life, and yet, on the other hand, secretly and quietly, he prescribes abortion pills, which is contrary to all that he believes. The action is contrary to all his beliefs, and this will lead to internal conflict and the destruction of his own identity. People like this will feel unsuccessful during this phase, and will have felt that their life has been wasted, and will experience many regrets, and they'll be left with feelings of bitterness and despair. And this is what the loss of integrity brings. The third effect of the loss of integrity is that it destroys human dignity. Everybody knows C.S. Lewis, but not very many people are acquainted with his wife. And she has 3 very important things to say about this loss of integrity. She says the 3 things happen when you've got the loss of integrity that affects human dignity. There are lies of gossip that make haters of us. There are lies of advertising that makes money out of us. There are lies of politicians that actually make power out of us. What Joy Davidman is saying is that the lack of integrity, the spreading of lies through gossip, actually influences us and makes us hate. In that sense, it actually uses us as objects. There are lies of advertising, and basically the more we listen to this advertising and buy into the lies that they tell us, then we will pay money to buy the goods that will be advertised, and basically the person who tells the lies benefits and making money out of us. And this is most evidently seen today in our political sphere. There is no better example of this than in Utusan, Malaysia, 2011 headline that based on a meeting between the NACF pastors, that they were actually plotting to make Christianity the official religion in Malaysia. And such a claim on the surface is such a ludicrous claim because the Christians make less than 10% of the entire population. How can this actually happen? But it achieved its desired political effect by galvanizing grassroots Malay support. And here you actually have Ibrahim Ali falling into this trap. He writes, Perkasa is ready to crusade against ungrateful Christians. And he says, if they want a crusade, so be it. Before our followers fail in this battle, leaders will lay down their lives and die in sprawling in blood. Here you actually have the Malay population being used by Utusan as a tool for their propaganda to achieve their political aims. And here actually is a denigration of the dignity of this group of people. You're treating them like pawns, recruiting them to your own evil purposes in order to achieve your political goals. The lack of integrity, so often in politics, actually destroys human dignity. What about that famous story about the honest George Washington, who as a young boy had actually mischievously cut down the cherry tree? When he was confronted with this, instead of lying and spinning and denying it, what he did was he confessed that he had chopped down a cherry tree and he was punished for it. Well, turned out that this first American president didn't actually do that. It was all a political lie to gain support. In fact, there was an article by CNN written by Ed Uravik, who was a former congressional chief of staff, that looked at all the presidents and actually concluded that every president has not only lied at some stage, but needs to lie in order to be effective. This is the kind of society that we actually live in. And there is no starker difference in lies in presidents than between Jimmy Carter, a Democratic president, and the current president, Donald Trump. Donald Trump has told 16,000 lies in office as of January 2020. Well, historians describe Jimmy Carter as he was too noble, too pure. He didn't know how to play people against one another. He should have read his Machiavelli. Here you have an honest Christian president who actually never made it very substantially. He was only a one-term president versus a pathological liar. One of the greatest sources of disinformation or fake news today is basically social media. And it's been noted with great sadness that Facebook is sticking to its policies on politicians' lies and voter targeting, which means they are not going to interfere with any ad which any politician puts up, even though it contains lies. Why? Simply because there's billions of dollars of campaign ads that need to be made. For the sake of money, Facebook will lose its integrity. This is ironic because the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, with his wife, Dr. Priscilla Chan, actually started the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for philanthropic purposes for the good of society and mankind. They want to cure diseases, they want to help the poor. But it's ironic, isn't it? They're actually willing to sacrifice their integrity, which in turn destroy human dignity of the very society which they're trying to help. Well, the lack of integrity destroys human dignity simply because it's exploiting people, because when you lie to people, you're not allowing them to see reality. When you don't allow them to see reality, you put them at a disadvantage. And when they're at a disadvantage, you use them, you turn them into the instruments of your own purposes. So therefore, you treat them like children, you treat them like objects, and this destroys basic human dignity. Finally, the loss of integrity will put you on a collision course with reality. Somehow, reality will come. You can get away with it today, tomorrow, but not forever. Ultimately, it will come. What about Pastor Bill Hybels, senior pastor of one of the largest, most successful, groundbreaking churches in America called the Saddleback Church? In the end, he had to step down because he led a double life, in front of the pulpit in holiness and at the back in sexual immorality. What about our former Prime Minister Najib Razak? When he was brought to trial, denied all knowledge about financial embezzlement. I didn't know, I was too busy running the country. But then reality hit like a train. By the next month, the MACC brought out actual tape recordings of all his illegal business dealings. The Chinese Communist Party is no different. They tried to cover up what the young Dr. Li Wenyan was trying to tell the world about the pandemic. Eventually, the truth came and hit the entire world like a train. It hit the Communist Party like a train. You couldn't hide the truth anymore. In January this year, President Trump was impeached because he was using his office for his personal gain, lying. And this is what Representative Adam Schiff said. What matters is whether he's a danger to the country, because he will do it again. And none of us have confidence based on his record that he will not do it again, because he's telling us every day that he will. You see, Adam Schiff's prophetic words were not taken to heart by the Republican Party, and they let Trump off. And yet, a month or two later on, the reality train hit in terms of the coronavirus. No amount of lying by the president could stop this train. He tried to cover it up, but in the end, there are more than 50,000 deaths and more than 1 million cases. You see, lying will only get you somewhere. The loss of integrity will only get you so far, but in the end, reality will take over. Well, what about the actual swearing or taking oaths? Well, the Bible is full of covenants. A covenant is an oath. Jesus takes an oath. Paul takes oaths. God takes an oath. Like Genesis 15, he takes an oath. When he says, do not swear an oath, let your yes be yes and your no be no. What he's saying is that there's no levels of truth. You don't have to back up what you say by swearing. If you're my disciple, Jesus is saying every single thing you say must be the truth. Every time you say something and you act something, you must be consistent as if you're swearing in a court of law. Matthew chapter 12. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give an account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. So everything you say should be said as if God is in front of you and you are under oath. What would you say if tomorrow whatever you said was recorded and put on Facebook? How would that change the way you speak? Would it make a difference? Sadly, we live in a world where we're so used to the usual white lies, political lies. Sorry, I'd love to come to your party, but I'm just going to be out of town. I'm not in when you're actually in. Or exaggerations. You always, you never. When you always say you always, you never, it's almost never true. You're not trying to get the truth out, but you're actually trying to beat up the other person and get them to do what you want them to do. Or word inflation. Everything that happens is fantastic, it's wonderful, you're amazing, it's all wonderful all the time. After a while, people won't believe you anymore. Or the benevolent lie, when somebody is playing a concert piece or cooks a nice miswa for you and says, how is it? And then you have to say, well, you know, it's actually okay, it's pretty nice, actually it sucked, you know, and we have to lie to get out of that. Or your boss comes and tells you, I'm sorry, we have to let you go. You know, he's actually sacking you, but he's cast in such a way that we have to let you go, but I don't want to go. You know, but he says we have to let you go, as if you are the one who's got to go and not him. Do we say yes when we actually should have said no? We're trying to please other people. Have you promised to do something or commit to something and then you know you cannot deliver? Or do you mislead someone by agreeing to do something in advance, something really unrealistic? Or do you say something in order to gain an advantage or to save your own reputation? Let's look again at Matthew chapter 3, chapter 5, verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. The word perform in Greek is apodidomi, which actually means you shall pay back, which gives you the concept that the truth actually costs. When we actually come to people and we want their approval, and we lie to get approval simply because our self-image is rooted in people's approval. If I tell people the truth, they will get so mad. So we spin or we lie because we don't want to pay the price. How do we get to a place where we're secure enough or happy enough to always tell the truth and to pay the price? Let's look at John 18, verse 19. John 18, verse 19. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. I've spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I've always taught at the synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews came together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. And then Jesus said this. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" And Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Here you actually have a situation where the Pharisees hit Jesus. Why? Because he's telling the truth. Jesus is actually paying the price for telling the truth in general and also paying for our dishonesty. Why couldn't the Pharisees stand Jesus? And why does he smack him for telling the truth? Because they couldn't bear to hear what Jesus said. Because whatever Jesus said undermined their self-esteem and their self-righteousness. He was stripped naked so that we could be clothed with his righteousness. When Jesus Christ looks into our hearts, he saw the worst in us and he loved us anyway. And now we have the security, the power to handle the truth. Whatever happens, whether people like us because we tell the truth or not, it really doesn't matter. I love the hymn. This hymn is called His Be the Victor's Name. In the second last verse, I'm going to read to you, says, "What though the accusers roar of ills that I have done? I know them well, and thousands more Jehovah find it well." The accuser is going to roar in our life. The accuser is Satan. He's going to roar about all the sins that I have done. But actually, I know my sins well, and I probably know 1,000 more. But the beautiful part is, Jehovah findeth none. When God looks at us, he sees none because of what Jesus has said. So today, we can be a people of integrity. Why? Because we are now clothed. We can handle the truth because we are now clothed in Christ. His righteousness means that I can handle the truth. I can pay the price. Whether someone likes me or doesn't like me, whether I lose control or not lose control, I am secure in Christ because Jesus paid the price for our dishonesty. So let's move on forward after this Gamma lesson to be a people of integrity, to be that city of lights in the hill, to be that salt in a world where there is fake news, in a world that has no integrity, in a world that's wallowing in lies and fake news every single day. We should be the people of integrity. We should be the wholesome human beings that the world can look at and follow. Thank you.